just get to spend more time together.
Yeah.
That's true.
I'm fine with it.
I like that.
She's like, I think that Deandra just did it on purpose so that she could get me back here.
It's true. And because we're both so like so chatty and we say a lot now, maybe this time will be like
Yes,
more
a little bit more
discretionary.
concise,
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
I do feel a bit further away from you today though.
I know, yeah. It does feel further.
And then I'll fuck up all the shots.
No.
We could both move in a little bit.
Like an inch or so.
Feels good?
Yeah, that feels better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably looks better on camera too.
Yeah.
Rechecking.
When you're a little bit close.
Focus. Making sure you two are nicely centered. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. It's smooth.
Okay. And yeah, give her a quick snack and then put her down for bed. Okay? Bye.
Hi. So we're editing all this part. Quick snack for
Maybe.
for the-
Maybe. Then people can see what mom life is.
Right? There you go.
Podcasting.
Yeah, actually that would be cool.
Yeah, last time we had a Tim like threw her on my lap
Oh.
and then had to do something, so she was in the last podcast too.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can talk about what we were just talking about later.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about parenting stuff, but we have so much to talk about.
I know.
So round 2.
Round 2.
Last time we only got 20 minutes. But you know what? Well, not because we didn't talk for 20 minutes, but there was an issue.
There's a technical issue.
There was a Oh, and Tim's going to be like, you guys, why'd you say that?
Oh.
I'm just fixing my mic.
Sorry.
Anyways, I'm still going to use that video because we talked a lot about the nervous system and
Yeah.
stuff, which I'm sure
Good.
we'll get into today. But
Yeah.
So Melissa West. Melissa is a really good friend of mine. I say this at almost the beginning of every podcast, but it's because I keep having all my great friends on because they're amazing people. But really, you're someone who's really, really close to me in my life. And so this is our second time that we get to record our conversation.
I know.
Yeah, but you're also so much more than my friend. Mm-hmm. You are a lot of different things to the community. Do you want to talk a little bit about who you are? And it doesn't have to be what you do. It can be, but just who you are.
Who I am. I guess a lot of my identity gets wrapped up in what I do because I'm so passionate about it. So I do have a pain management clinic here in town. It's called Change Your Pain Kamloops. And we have a team of practitioners, and you're included in that, even though you're at a different location at the moment, but you do come in to do contract work too. So we have manual therapists, which are registered massage therapists, kinesiologists. We're just currently looking for a physio, and we'd also like to maybe have a chiropractor in the clinic too. So we've got some ads out for that. And then we have a naturopathic physician and the clinical counseling aspect. And we work as a team to try to get people healthy, and they can see us individually or they can see us as a team. So it gives people accessibility no matter which way they'd like to go through the process. And the clinic is really based on balancing out the body and making sure all the joints and muscles and tissues are healthy and all the movement patterns are good and functional, but then also working with the nervous system. And that's where you and I end up spending a lot of time is your approach to counseling is also quite nervous system driven, and so is our approach to healing the body, because everything that happens in the body happens in the brain first. So we have to make sure that nervous system is as calm as possible. So, and I've lived in Kamloops for, it just turned over 22 years in December. And I grew up on Vancouver Island, lived in Vancouver for about 8 or 9 years going to school. I have a degree in kinesiology from UBC, and I have a diploma from the West Coast College of Massage Therapy. And I love doing volunteer work and traveling abroad to do it if I can, but doing it locally as well, and just helping people be the best that they can be.
Yeah.
You know, cliche, better version of themselves, but I don't even know if I like that. I just like helping facilitate a better quality of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds more up your alley. And I think that shines through in everything you do, not just in your work as a clinic manager or manual therapist, but even as you are in your community with your friends and the people that you bring close to you. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I get to be part of that, so I can say.
And I'm working on taking compliments better, so this is very difficult for me.
I was very impressed with that. It's a tough thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so pain management. So pain management clinic, you talked about taking the multifaceted approach to supporting people with pain, and the nervous system. And so we'll talk more about the nervous system, but your clinic is yours the only like multidisciplinary clinic in the city, or there might be a couple others?
There are a couple others. I think what kind of sets us apart, the uniqueness of our clinic comes from the actual interdisciplinary approach, which means that the practitioners actually communicate with each other about the patient if the patient wants that.
Yes.
Whereas in other clinics, a lot of practitioners do work together. Similar types of practitioners are in the same space, but they're not always communicating with each other.
Right.
They will say, okay, go to this person, and maybe the patient is going to all different practitioners at the same time, but there's no real team approach. And I could be wrong, but just from what I've picked up with patients that have come to our clinic and talking to other colleagues, it's more of a multidisciplinary approach in other clinics, which is just you're sharing space and you're each working on the patient individually.
Right. Okay.
Whereas ours is more interdisciplinary, where we actually will communicate with each other.
Right. And you also, and I have experienced that, so I would 100% agree. But also you offer, like for ICBC clients, you offer like a package, which is like, are you still doing the program? Yeah. So the program that is like a interdisciplinary program where you say, you know, these are the sessions that, you know, we're going to offer you for your rehabilitation. And so when they enter that program, they have access to these interdisciplinary practitioners.
Yes. All in the same space.
Yes.
Which is really convenient for them too. So we set up a program, we help the patient get it approved through ICBC, and then hopefully, you know, they approve it and we continue on from there. And it works really well. It works very quickly.
Yes.
And that's what people need to feel motivated, is to see results quickly. And they just feel well looked after. You know, they don't have to think about, well, where do I have to go next? What do I have to do? There's so much stress involved with dealing with healing, and then dealing with the bureaucracy of an institution like ICBC or lawyers or whatever, that it takes that out of their hands. So it's one less stress for them, and then they can focus on their healing.
It's amazing. And having been a practitioner who's taken part in that program, it takes it, you know, sometimes as a counselor or therapist, it can feel like a lot when you know that a client needs more than just you, and most people do. But when, you know, someone comes from a motor vehicle accident situation where they're looking for rehabilitation, when I'm working solo and not interdisciplinary with other practitioners, the responsibility feels like it's on my shoulders, and I know that it's not, like, I'm not enough, and it is not my responsibility, but it can feel like a lot. But when I'm working in that environment with you guys, and I know that the client is getting support with their physical health, with their nervous system outside of our sessions, and we have the same kind of idea and goal, it's inspiring as a practitioner. And I don't feel like I'm a silo in this, you know, large rehabilitation plan, which all ICBC clients are going through, right? Because they are all mostly seeing counselors, massage therapists, physio, some of them OTs. Yeah.
And I think it's a really great learning. That's what came from my experience over the years, is I've worked in other clinics as well. And I originally worked in the Welcome Back clinic here with the MRI, the upright MRI, which is like the only one of its kind in Canada. It's very unique. And we had a whole team interdisciplinary approach there. And I was able to work with surgeons and other doctors and specialists, as well as paramedical practitioners, which is your chiropractors, your physios, your massage therapists, your kinesiologists. And there's, in an interdisciplinary approach, there's so much more learning for the practitioner.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it. You know, I've learned so much from you. We can discuss things that, like you say, you start to feel, and I worked for years on my own, and I tried to do everything and within my scope. And you get to a point that you realize I can only offer this person so much. And it can be a lot, but there's that one kind of, you know, missing piece or a couple missing pieces. And you're like, they could even be better.
Yes.
And then, you know, that's when I realized, okay, it's time to really work with other practitioners. Like, seriously, not just send them out and go see you later, right? But actually do that interdisciplinary thing.
And be collaborative.
Yeah.
You know, so one of the things that came up when you're talking about that is the conversation I have with a lot of people that are coming to see me is around how our physical health implicates our mental well-being, our mental health, and how, you know, and I laugh when I say this to them because I'm like, you don't want to hear this from your counselor, but the first thing I'm going to say is you need to move your body.
Right.
Like, you need to move your body. And I'm not saying you have to go to the gym. I'm not saying, you know, but as a counselor, that's a message that I give everybody, but it's not an easy message to get from your counselor.
No.
Right. Because it's like, hey man, I didn't come to you for you to tell me that I need to move my body. You know, but so when I'm working in a team environment, like I can give that message, but then like another person can give that message, like a kinesiologist or a massage therapist that's saying it's really important for your nervous system to move your body. And I'm not the only one saying that.
Right.
And then I can also focus more specifically on things like mental health.
Yeah.
But these other pieces are so important that I talk about them anyways.
Yeah. And that's why I love working with you is because you really get that mind-body connection and not only understand it, but you live it and you impart it onto your patients. And it's a very important part of your practice. And the same goes for me. It's been a long time where although my patients seem very receptive to talking about the nervous system, at first I think it sort of shocks them that I'm even bringing that up because they don't think of my scope of practice or why they're there as talking about what's going on in their brain and their nervous system. But you just can't separate the two.
Right.
It's
okay, let's get into it. Let's get into it because
really get into it.
because this is new medicine, right? Like this is a new approach to working with the human body. Because for so long it was always looking at the physical symptoms and then we would look at the mental health. Like they were two separate things. And then I would say maybe in the last 20 years, maybe more or less, but things have shifted where they're talking more about the nervous system and how the nervous system, so it's the anatomical? No, what is it?
Autonomic.
Thank you.
Yep.
Autonomic nervous system.
Yeah.
And which has two parts to it.
Yes.
Parasympathetic and sympathetic.
Yes.
And so the nervous system is the physiological system that governs your body, right? So this has implications on your temperature, your heart rate, your digestion, your muscle tension, your sleep, and then your mood. So whether you're feeling anxious, depressed, angry, unsettled, sad,
Right.
And what else? Is there anything else I missed?
It also affects the amount of inflammation in your body.
Right, that's the big part.
Yeah.
So sickness, your immune system,
disease.
And the nervous system gets regulated by certain activities, but it can also be, I don't want to say, or it can become dysregulated, that's the word, by certain things like traumas in our life. So things like motor vehicle accidents or even childhood traumas can develop a way of, or can develop, can impact your nervous system in functioning in a certain way chronically.
Right.
That's what I mean to say.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Absolutely.
So, yeah. And so when you work with pain, because pain is your specialty, would you say?
Chronic pain, yeah.
Chronic pain?
Yeah. And injuries, I guess. So any type of pain.
Okay. So any type of pain. So then how is pain, the experience of pain, connected to the nervous system?
So pain happens in the brain. So if you have an injury, say in your ankle, that's not where the pain starts. There's a signal that goes from your ankle up to your brain, and your brain decides whether or not you're going to feel pain over it. Okay. So that's a really important, I think, first thing for people to understand. And if the nervous system is really what I call dialed up or amped up, or in the sympathetic part of the nervous system where you are in fight or flight mode, the pain center becomes highly hypersensitive.
Okay.
Because it's been that way for so long, it starts to worry that everything around you might be dangerous. And it's trying to protect you, but it's just gotten out of control. And it's dysregulated, like you said.
Right, so the fire alarm is going off when it doesn't need to be going off.
That's right. So it starts to recognize even normal movements, and that's why people with chronic pain especially will do regular house chores and have so much pain, or they just get out of bed or walk around a little bit, normal movements, the brain is now decided that even that is dangerous, and then it will send more pain. So pain begets pain, and it becomes this negative feedback loop. And so we have to break that pain. That increased pain and that increased perception of the brain that there's danger also increases muscle tension, which increases more pain.
Right. And that's the pain cycle in itself. It's
Absolutely.
like pain, you guard
Yes.
because you're in pain, so you tighten, and then you get more pain, and then it just continues.
Yeah, it's that
Oh, and
vicious
then
cycle.
the thoughts. So then you get
Yeah.
more pain, and then your thoughts become negative.
Yes.
And it becomes difficult to cope.
Yeah.
And that added stress
Yes.
of having a hard time coping, again, impacts the sympathetic nervous system. So it heightens your stressors, and then that increases the pain signal and the muscles, and it continues.
So it's the pain tension cycle, and I'm glad you added the thought part in there, because if the thoughts become catastrophic or negative about what's happening to you, what you're telling the brain is that it is really bad.
Right.
And if the
And it's
brain,
right.
and
It's right. The brain's right. It is threatening. It's bad.
right.
Yeah.
Instead of, okay, well, I'm just moving normally, so this shouldn't really be affecting me. And it's not causing any damage. It might be hurting, but it's not damage. So you have to figure out that difference between hurt and harm. It might hurt, but it's not harming.
Right.
And so we have to educate people on that too. And so it's all about controlling how that brain perceives what's going on around it. And when you have chronic pain, the brain perceives things in a completely different way than when you don't have chronic pain, or when your nervous system is what we call present and engaged and more in the parasympathetic mode of the nervous system. So if we don't deal with the nervous system when we have people that have pain, we can make all their tissues and joints and movement patterns more functional. But if this brain is still amped up and still thinking that everything around it is dangerous, we're never going to get them to a place where they're either almost pain-free and more functional, or completely pain-free, because the brain controls what happens. You just can't separate the two. It's impossible.
Yes. Okay. And I want to add another thing too with this, is because when the sympathetic nervous system is active, it's not just pain, the pain input that's coming into that, right? So we need to look, so it's, when I talk about the nervous system, it's about stimulation. So what is overstimulating or stimulating your experience? So, if you have a lot of stress in your life, that's a factor. If you have a history of trauma, like big trauma, so like trauma is a buzzword or something that we're talking a lot about now, but that impacts how you regulate your nervous system, or how regulated your nervous system is. Yeah. So when you have chronic pain, you're not only managing the stress of the chronic pain, but you have to remember that everything else in life either helps regulate or helps dysregulate your nervous system. Exactly. And if you already have a sensitive nervous system because of your chronic pain, I like to explain the chronic pain as being like this low-level stress input all the time. So you only have a little bit of space before you hit complete overwhelm and can't cope. So, you have to think about, okay, I have a sensitive nervous system. What are the things that I can actually handle, and how am I supporting that nervous system all the time? And so even when I'm working with clients that aren't in, say, chronic pain, but have a lot of trauma in their lives, they also experience what you're talking about, except for it's not physical pain they're experiencing, it's emotional pain.
Absolutely.
And this is such a light bulb moment for me, because these two experiences aren't separate.
No.
So emotional pain, when we've had a lot of trauma, it's the same thing. Like the fire alarms are going off in communication with others, where we think that they're, being negative to us, or we're in conflict with people, or we're fearful of conflict at work or with our relationships, or it's like that fire alarm is going off and you're thinking that things are worse than they are in your life emotionally. And again, then I approach it with, okay, so sensitive nervous system, how can we support your whole body?
Yeah. And that brings up, I think what you're talking about there is lifestyle stuff. So when somebody comes to the clinic, it's very much looking at their lifestyle and getting them to look at that, which they're also in the beginning kind of going, why are we talking about how I sleep and how I go to the washroom and how I digest and how I eat and how I exercise? Because that all affects your nervous system. So, and making sure that they're given tools and strategies to discharge the nervous system whenever they can, because life, general life, even without trauma, physical, mental, or emotional trauma, is always keeping our nervous system at a level where we're not really present and engaged. And when you hear all the time about let's be in the moment, let's be more present and engaged, there's a lot to that. It's not easy. And I think sometimes people kind of make it seem like we should just be able to do it, but that's not really the reality of it. You have to learn how to be present and engaged.
And you have to have a nervous system.
And you have to have a nervous system that supports that.
That's right.
And the only way to do that is to start to bring it down and
Yes.
discharge that nervous system whenever you can. And there's simple little tools that you can do. And we help people with that. And then we also send them to counselors to go the extra mile with that. And I can't remember, you're talking about something else. There's so many things when you talk that I just want to get into. But basically, when you think of the nervous system being dialed up and the alarm bells going off, you have to remember that every center of your brain is more hypersensitive. Every center in your brain. So the anger center, if you want to kind of look at it like that, that's why we get more irritable, because it's just more hypersensitive.
Right.
So and it's not just pain, like you said. Really, the difference between traumatic emotional pain and physical pain is just the way it manifests. It all is interpreted by the brain the same way.
Yes.
It's just how the body or the parts of the brain react to it.
Yeah.
And which center in the brain it affects the most, really, is all it is. So it's really the same kind of input into the brain and the same effect on the nervous system, and it's all how it manifests.
That's right.
So it's just, it's once you get that, it's just so fascinating, because you can deal with people, whether they've got physical or emotional trauma, really the very same way, very similarly.
At least the first step, like the
Yes.
first part of it.
Yeah.
And it also promotes this the whole body perspective, right? That when we look at having mental health or even physical health or well-being or quality of life, it's like we have to look at this holistically, and we can't just focus on, I don't think we can focus just on, say, anxiety or depression specifically without looking at our experience in our bodies and also our lifestyle.
Yes. And
You
our
can't
perception of
That's
the
right.
world around us.
Right. And so actually this brings up something that I had already kind of thought, okay, we need to go there. I think it's also important to say too, though, that when our nervous system is really dysregulated, so we're in the sympathetic state more often than not, that we can't deal with the perception. Some of us can't change the way we think, no matter how hard we try. And I suggest when you're at this place in your life, you need some deeper work. And it suggests that your nervous system has become so chronically dysregulated that it's overriding any sort of attempt to change thoughts or to look at things differently, because it can have that pull. Right? When you're so dysregulated, you can't change the way that you think.
Well, you're in survival mode. Your
That's
brain
right.
thinks that you're dying,
That's right.
literally.
Or running
Or running, like you have got to survive. So that's all it's concerned about.
Yeah.
And it will shut everything else down, and you won't be able to access centers of your brain that you normally can. And other centers will be like super set off like that.
Yep.
And it just makes everything completely imbalanced in the brain and in the body. Because if it's imbalanced in the brain, it happens in the body, right?
Totally.
So yeah, it's a great tool if you can get people to understand that connection
And build the awareness.
and give them, start off simply, give them tools to start, and then recognize as a practitioner when to send them on for deeper work.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, it's usually when there's just nothing that's changing where they are, and their thought processes have become so negative and catastrophic, and it doesn't seem to matter what we do with them physically
or what they try to do with
or
themselves.
what they try to do with them.
They're like trying to redirect their thoughts. They're trying to think differently. And then, I've actually personally been here before where you read all this stuff. It's like, oh, affirmations and thinking differently. And if I just try harder, then I'll feel better. And then you try and you don't want to tell anyone like, hey, actually, that shit doesn't work for me. And I'm still feeling super anxious. And it doesn't matter how many times I try to think differently, it's not working. That's when I say, you know what? I would ask, like, how are you supporting your body first, right? And what's your lifestyle like, as always?
Yes.
And then I would say, if you're feeling like your lifestyle is pretty good, like you aren't too stressed out, or you're coping reasonably well with stress, but you still have anxiety, then I would say, okay, let's look at some deeper work.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't have to be so scary and limiting. It's just
No.
a clue. Like, okay.
Yeah, and people often forget too about the lifestyle stuff. You know, am I eating well? Am I feeding myself? Am I hydrating? Dehydration causes increased nervous system response.
Of course it does, because it's like,
you think you're the body thinks you're dying.
like, I don't know when I'm going to get water.
Right? And people just downplay that. They just think, oh, well, I'll drink when I'm thirsty. Once you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So you've gone through the whole day basically with your nervous system amped up because you haven't had any water. And then the food. Are you feeding yourself well? Are you getting proper rest? Like all those things, they're simple things. They're not always easy, but they're simple things that people can control. So looking at what people have control of and trying to get them to that place where they can actually do it, because it's not always easy, I think it's the first step to anything, is the lifestyle stuff.
Yes, and I'm laughing right now because
Why?
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the first times that you've treated me, which was a place in my life where I was still quite young and didn't understand my own system yet. And I remember having the conversations about lifestyle with you, and my thought was like, this is crap. Like, this isn't the answer. Like, what do you mean stop drinking so much coffee and eating so much sugar?
Right?
Or smoking so much weed.
Right.
You know, you're like,
Yeah.
and so I'm just laughing at, because I know I've been there.
You're resistant.
Totally resistant. And also feeling like, and I think this is because the health industry has become so oppressive. It's become so oppressive for all of us, where it feels like it's too much to meet the standards of health, right?
So true.
And so we don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Because it just feels so restrictive.
So overwhelming.
So overwhelming. And like, I'm definitely not going to succeed because these are the expectations of me to be healthy. So you just want to write it off completely. Like, it's bogus, right?
Totally good point.
But it's not. And when I look at my lifestyle now, it's completely different from what it used to be. But again, I don't think it's one thing. It's like when I look at my own personal journey towards health, and it's been very nervous system based because I've done a lot of counseling through somatic experiencing with Verdell Jessup, and that's for nervous system regulation. And then lots of massage and then movement. So it's hard to say what is the factor because I took your advice, which was this all around approach.
Yeah.
Because when I saw you, it was like, well, you know, you have to exercise and, you know, don't go to the gym and overdo it because then you're going to overstimulate your nervous system.
Right.
So just move your body.
Yeah. And think about what you're eating.
That's right. Reduce your caffeine. And then when I would come in and see like, oh, my knee is really bothering me again. And you would say, so like, has anything changed? Have you been eating more sugar lately? Have you? And I'm like, grrr.
Yeah. Don't ask me that. Aren't you just supposed to be doing like exercise and rubbing my body?
Yeah, but it's true.
Yeah.
And even like after Christmas,
Yeah.
I'm like, my body's sore. My knees are acting up. Why is this happening? And then I start feeling sorry for myself. And I'm like, my body feels like crap. And then I'm like, what have I been eating for 2 weeks? Well, I've been eating shortbread cookies.
Yep.
And I've been drinking caffeine. And like, no regrets. I did it. It was great. But my body starts screaming. And it's a reminder.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And once you get to that place where you're more present and engaged the majority of the time, your nervous system is in a good place, that's when you can recognize those differences.
Right.
But when you're up here, you can't even recognize that at all. There's no recognizing that. It's not going there. So you just can't be in touch with your body. You can't be in your body when your nervous system is so dysregulated. And I have a question for you.
Yes.
So all of these changes, and I've seen you make a lot of changes over the years that we've known each other, and we started... our connection started 2014. So it's been just over 5 years.
Yes.
Yeah. So over that 5 years, I've seen you change dramatically in your lifestyle.
Yes.
And it didn't happen overnight. And that's
No.
what people need to understand. It's baby steps. And if you just change one little thing at a time, even one tiny little thing, it leads to the next thing and the next thing. And all it is every day taking an action step, whether it be the same thing you did the day before, but doing it and reinforcing it. And then maybe the next day you're ready for something else to change.
Yes.
But really doing it slowly, because or else we get dysregulated again because the brain starts to freak out.
That's right. I was just going to say, if you try to change too much. Okay, so actually, I'm going to take this a different route. It's like our nervous system it develops a pattern of being. And we do things to maintain that pattern, right? So if you've had, I'm going to use the example of trauma, like emotional trauma. Say if you've had, let's use not like a big trauma, like a car accident or a natural disaster, but like consistent small traumas that are happening over your childhood because, you know, maybe you didn't have a super stable home because of finances or whatever. I mean, we all experience trauma. I just want to put that out there to some degree.
Yeah.
But so then your nervous system develops a way of being because maybe you're on alert all the time because things weren't very stable at home. So your nervous system was constantly monitoring and being on alert for your own safety to create some stability and, yes, let's say for some safety. So it develops that way of being. And so it's a overstimulated, maybe a slightly anxious nervous system. And then you go through life and you realize like this way of living isn't working for me anymore. And I'm actually realizing that I don't feel good in my body a lot of the time, however that shows up. So you start to do work. Now, like personal work, whether that's physical work or going to a counselor. And if you do things too quickly, your nervous system won't allow it because it doesn't want to move out of that pattern because that's the way it's been functioning. So if you decide like, hey, I'm going to change all of these things at once, it just becomes another massive stressor.
Seems like danger.
It seems like danger. And it's taking away the things that you're using to cope to maintain that nervous system state. So it's almost, I like to explain it as it's like you have to change the pattern of the way that your nervous system is operating. And either you need to do things very slowly for that to happen. Or if that's still not working, you need to do some deeper stuff to change some of that old trauma. But it's you can't just be like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then like,
I heard a really good analogy that I think works pretty well, and I can't remember where I heard it, but it wasn't anything that we have to reference anyways. So something about like salting your food, right? So if you take salt and you feel like your food needs salt, so just like our bodies, we know we need to revamp things because something's not working. If you just take the salt shaker and pour a whole huge amount of salt on there at once, it's not probably going to work very well for you. It's going to end badly. But if you take a little bit and then you try it, and then you need a little bit more, so you put a little bit more on, you're going to be much more successful in the end getting the right amount of salt on your food. I like that analogy because that's the way it is when you try to get the nervous system to change. You try a little bit. Let's see how this is working. Let's get it working right. And then, okay, maybe I want a little bit more. So I'll do a little bit more or put a little bit more change into my lifestyle. And pretty soon you've got just the right amount of balance of everything.
right. And everybody's different.
Yes, exactly. Because just like with salt, everybody's different.
Exactly.
Right? I love that analogy.
That's so perfect.
Good. Yeah.
That's such a good analogy. And it's a reminder to us that you have to take it slow, and that part of the practice is actually being in your body and experiencing how it feels. And so for me, and I still struggle with this, slowing down, taking rest, like seriously, like sitting down for 5 minutes was not accessible to me. And this sounds hilarious, or like I'm lying, but I'm not. And Tim can attest to this, because if it would feel so painful in the sense that if I slowed down, my body would then want to actually relax. And then if I would actually relax, I would realize how tired I really am. And if I realize how tired I really am, then I can't continue with the things that I need to do. So what's a better option for my nervous system used to be is to not stop. Because if I didn't stop, then I wouldn't actually know how tired I am.
That's right.
So I never stopped.
No. And this is a common thread among our society, because we are so task-oriented. So again, it's like finding that balance in life with everything, but doing it slowly and realizing you're not superhuman. Don't get overwhelmed by the process. Just every day do something that empowers you by doing something positive to move yourself forward.
Because that feels good.
Yeah, it does. And anything that's empowering or any positive thought, as you know, thoughts do become things. Yes. Thoughts affect, and they know, and we've got to find the research and tack it on to the end of this, but some good research about how they've studied negative thoughts and how it affects the release of different chemicals in the brain that create negative manifestations physically. you know, and they know for sure. And I will also find this research and tack it on, that instantly when the nervous system even amps up a tiny bit, like if somebody were to walk into that door right now and we both went, oh, who's that? That our nervous system would, it's a protection mode is our nervous system, basically our sympathetic nervous system. It would amp up for a second until we figured out it was safe. Right. So it is there for a reason. It's just we got to keep it regulated.
Right.
But when that happens, they've proven that when that spike happens, it is instant low-grade inflammation in the body. So you have the potential for more pain and disease and suppression of the immune system just from a tiny short burst of increase of sympathetic nervous system. So if you have that all the time, you know that you're going to have more physical manifestations, negative physical manifestations.
Chronic illness, chronic pain,
exactly.
whatever it is.
Yes.
And you know, Mel, that's huge research, because we often ask, like, why do certain people get sick and other people not get sick?
Totally.
And so, I could see how some people might interpret this as being really depressing or hard to hear. But on the flip side of it, it's like it shows you how much more control we actually have, right? I like to look at this from a control perspective. Like if we understand that stress really is the implicator for chronic health issues, then let's look at how to reduce or learn. And you know what? Here's the thing. Not reduce. I don't want to say reduce stress. I want to say cope with stress, because life is inherently stressful.
It is.
You will suffer.
You will. It's struggle. It's with
struggle.
Moments of joy.
That's right.
That's it.
So how are you handling the struggle?
Yeah. So that the moments of joy can be better.
And can you actually allow the moments of joy to happen?
Yes.
Are you allowing yourself to thrive? Yes. Can you get into a state in your body where you can truly enjoy an experience?
Yeah. And that's all about being present and engaged, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I wanted to say is with our nervous system, and you just made this point, but I want to reiterate it, it's that it's normal to have a sympathetic activation in your nervous system and a parasympathetic activation. And it's happening all day long, multiple times a day.
Yes.
It's just we don't want to get stuck in that state of being sympathetically active or get into the freeze state, which is when we move past sympathetic and we go into this state called, it's the dorsal vagal system, which is the playing dead system.
The critter brain.
And the system that, like an old part of our system that was used for playing dead, which is when, you know, we're feeling depressed, you're in that state.
Yeah.
Where
everything shuts down.
Everything shuts down. So you've passed the state of fight or flight. You've either been in that state too much, or your system feels like it's safer just to go into.
Yes. And not only safer, but you expend so much energy when you're in fight or flight, because you're either ready to fight or run. That takes a lot of energy. All the blood goes to your muscles all the time. There's a lot of tone. There's a lot of extra things going. Some things are shut down, like digestion, and other things are just on. And so that creates so much extra energy for our bodies. That's why people are so tired all the time too. Not only because they don't, but that also keeps you from sleeping. But I added onto it, you're exerting all this extra energy all the time. And so eventually the nervous system goes, my gosh, we don't have any more reserves left. We have to shut down. And so it goes into freeze mode. So that's part of it too, as well as if you have a really super overstimulating, super dangerous situation that's more acute, you'll go into that freeze mode because you get so crazy, dangerously threatened that you go into critter brain, which is your old way when we didn't have the rest of our nervous system, which is your old way of coping with danger, which is just
play dead,
like a lizard. They do that.
Exactly. And certain goats and animals.
So it's always about discharging, right?
And support.
Yeah. And then when you bring up like depression and that freeze mode when everything shuts down is really what we see in society, right? So people are really anxious, or they're depressed, or a little of both. And it's because we're either all amped up in our sympathetic nervous system, or we've gone so far into sympathetic that everything shuts down and we go into depression.
Yes.
And, that's kind of my contention is that, and just based on research and my experience more than anything, is that's one of society's big problems now is that if we're not managing our nervous systems well. And it's creating all this disease and anxiety and depression. And once we get to that place where we can figure that out, and it's going to take a really long time, everybody's going to feel better and life is going to be better. And there's not going to be able to
enjoy life.
Right? And there's not going to be all the same amount of societal issues and people that need, opioids or stimulants or substances to help them through it. They're going to be able to cope on their own.
Yes.
So
this is another important topic, is like substances and nervous system. And it's like sometimes we use substances to maintain the nervous system state that we're used to, right? So like my example is coffee for me. So I like to think about my coffee habit will actually support the way that my system used to function. Keeps me really amped, really there. So it can be enticing for me to keep going there.
Yeah.
But then some things like, and it's not so cut and dry, but I'm going to use examples. Some things like marijuana or cannabis can help people get into that parasympathetic nervous system after they've like overstimulated themselves with the use of it. But then after they burn out, the burnout stage is like, feels like the parasympathetic nervous system has calmed down and they're able to, but that's not necessarily the best route either. It's like you want your nervous system to regulate on its own.
On its own. Because if you don't have that substance, it just goes right back up to where it was.
Yeah.
So and they also have research, which again, we're going to have to find and tack on, where actually substances really of any kind, and marijuana is included in that, as long as it has the THC component. The CBD component is a whole nother aspect of that. And that it actually makes anxiety worse. It actually starts to heighten your nervous system rather than decrease it every time you use it.
Right. So the dopamine, I think it's, I'm gonna take a shot at this. The dopamine inhibitors increase, right? Because that's why it feels good when you first start using marijuana or cannabis, is because you start to have the inhibitors, so you're not having the same reaction. So you're less sensitive to stresses when you first start using it. But then eventually you have so many dopamine inhibitors active that then you also don't get to feel the joy in life. It's kind of like that flatline experience. So you're both not getting as stressed out for some people, but you're also not motivated or experiencing. Right. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your body's not stressed out. No. Right. They're not separate. But your experience or the way you're perceiving it is that you're not as stressed out.
Yeah. And I think it'd be good to find some research that talks about how it actually increases the fight or flight response in the brain, even though you may not interpret it that way. Like you say, your nervous system is still amped up.
And you've seen this research?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we should try to find it and tag it on.
We'll get that on.
Okay, folks, we'll do our best with the stuff we attach to the bottom.
There's been a few things.
Yeah. We've promised ourselves next time, okay, we'll have some research.
Yeah.
So we'll try to give some, so we're not just talking out of our ass.
Yeah. And, I think you hear a lot of people, we were talking about that whole health issue. And you hear about a lot of people that are seemingly healthy, that exercise all the time and that eat well, and they die early. And then this becomes, I think, ammunition for people to go, oh, well, it doesn't matter if we eat well and exercise because people die anyways. And so why bother? But what people aren't looking at with these individuals is, where's their nervous system at?
Right.
And just because you eat well and you exercise regularly, one, it doesn't mean you're doing the right exercise or maybe the right eating for you. But the big thing is nobody's really looking at, is their nervous system amped up all the time? Because you can do one part of your lifestyle really healthy and the other parts not so healthy, or maybe they've had trauma in their life, emotional or physical, and it's never been dealt with and the nervous system has never been discharged. So they have these healthy aspects in their life, but again, the stress and the amped up nervous system is what takes them down.
That's right. Yeah, and it's that's why it comes back to whole picture.
Exactly.
It's whole picture, and we're all so uniquely different, and it's about learning and understanding yourself and noticing the cues. Like, do I find myself constantly amped? Am I addicted to high stress situations and excitement? That's the only place I can operate. And it's very nuanced. It's not, there's no cookie cutter approach to health or healing. It's self-healing, because you have to learn and understand yourself and become connected with your experience in your body to truly learn how to heal.
Absolutely.
And that's harder work than going to someone and being told, like,
Yeah.
this is the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no recipe.
No.
There's no recipe, and it's baby steps. And life is 100 times better once you start to understand who you are, what you need, and taking little steps every day to do it. Because you feel empowered, you feel good physically, you're clear mentally. Like I said, those moments of joy, whether they're few or far between, are just so much more intense.
Yes.
And then that feeds your brain more, because those moments of joy actually help the nervous system discharge too.
Yes.
So it's so important not just to have joy just because, well, it feels good. It's also, again, it's healthy to have joy.
It is important. And I was listening to this podcast. So I listened to a podcast called Mega Mama, and she's a somatic experiencing practitioner. And I got onto her during pregnancy because she does a lot with birthing and sexuality. But she was having a conversation with another somatic experiencing practitioner. I'll link this podcast in the show notes. But he was talking about how it's, instead of looking at ourselves through a lens of trauma, like, because when we think about trauma, it feels gross, right? When we get told that we have traumas running our lives and that's the issue, that can feel really defeating. And it can make us feel like we're messed up and that there's no way out, right? It's like a diagnosis can feel like a box that we can't come out of. And so he talks about attuning to pleasure. So learning how to be present with joy or pleasure, we can call it pleasure, and how to find healthy ways of pleasure in our life. So I'm not talking about drinking, and I'm not talking about smoking weed, I'm talking about like other forms of pleasure, not addictions or things that we, indulge, right? And I guess it's not that cut and dry either, because we have to look at like, okay, if I'm going to using cannabis every day and that's where I'm getting my pleasure, what is it that it's doing for me? What do I think it's doing for me? And is there other ways that I can get that similar experience and also have more pleasure in my life, so it's not just coming from the use of cannabis, right?
Yes.
Because when we focus on things like your addiction or like stop using cannabis or stop doing this or stop doing that, again, that feels hard and gross for a lot of people. So it's like, how can we attune to more pleasure in our life, and how would you get more pleasure in your life?
Yeah. Are you asking me? Or are you just saying?
I'm just saying, like, that's a good question, right? It's like, how can you get more pleasure?
Yeah. And I think that's a good point too, is when you have these things that maybe you are indulging in your life, that you kind of maybe know aren't the greatest for you. It's not about necessarily going cold turkey and thinking badly that you're doing something bad, but looking at it and going, what else can I do to make my life even more fulfilling?
That's right.
Right? And then maybe those things fade away. Maybe they don't. Maybe you're able to balance them with other healthy things in your life and still keep that healthy. But it's just, it's just that line between the body is meant for some toxicity and some stress, and it's actually good to stress the body in a healthy way, physically, mentally, or emotionally, because that's how our bodies become stronger.
Right.
However, once you cross a line, then it starts to break things down.
Right.
And that's what it is about this self-care, self-love, self-healing, is you've got to figure out where your line is. And if you add just a few things in that are healthy, that give you that healthy joy and healthy pleasure, eventually you'll figure that out.
Well, you won't be so keen to grab the other thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll share publicly, I've struggled a lot with the use of cannabis, and it's something that weaves in and out of my life. And I know that when I'm using it regularly or more than I want to, it's when I'm not doing the other things that I need to be doing. And usually it's music, right? So if I'm not playing enough music or if I'm not getting outside enough, that's another thing, then I will go to cannabis use for that type of stimulation and calm, right? That I think that I'm getting from getting outside, feeling grounded and relaxed in my body, or the stimulation I get from writing and playing music. And it's not to say that, you shouldn't engage in any of these things, like you said. It's just knowing your line. Same with coffee. Yeah. Right?
Yes. And knowing when it's becoming an unhealthy addiction.
Right.
And that is one of the key signs of an unhealthy addiction. And I've been studying this lately because I've had some little men come into my life that love video games, like all little kids do. And so I'm studying video game addiction to make sure that we're doing the right things with them. And the real key is that once it keeps you from doing healthy things, once your addiction or your activity of whatever it is or a substance that you're using keeps you from doing the healthy things and making the healthy choices, then you know that things are going down that slippery slope. Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it. Because I also think that this idea of, or the approach of restriction.
Yeah, it's not good.
No, and it also amps the nervous system up.
Absolutely.
Because it's fearful. Like, oh, you're going to take all my coping.
Right.
All my coping strategies.
Totally.
Or,
that's not effective either.
Yeah, it's not. So you can't, and I've never had success with the route of restriction.
No, it's just like diet and exercise. I really stress with my patients, make it sustainable. We all know what foods are bad for us. You know, you're not going to get all those foods completely out of your diet. That's unrealistic and it's not sustainable. So just know that, you know, if you have something that you know is not so unhealthy, the next time have something healthier for the next meal, or eat something healthy with it. You know, I've had the odd time, and I know it sounds funny, I'll have a cinnamon bun and a carrot stick. I feel better about that.
Hey man, balance.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you're getting some nutrition, you're getting some fiber to absorb the sugar, because I know all these things in my head. So that feels good for me. And I'm not saying everybody should do that, but you know, like, I'm not perfect either. And I don't think that's a good thing, to think that you're going to be pure and perfect, because it does amp up the nervous system. There's so much stress around that. You're like, oh my God, I wasn't perfect today.
Exactly.
That's not good.
No.
Right? You have to feel good about it. And I always tell people too, when I eat well and I exercise well, I feel good about it. I don't feel like I'm restricting myself, because those things to me are actually indulging. I'm indulging myself now at this point in my life with what I've done with my lifestyle. When I eat well and I move my body properly and I do it in a very light to moderate way, consistently and diligently, not going to boot camp and killing myself and overworking my body and breaking it down. I'm not saying that boot camp is bad, but it doesn't work for me. And I found that consistent, diligent, light, and moderate. And when I do that, I feel like I'm indulging.
Right.
And I've gotten to that point, but it's taken years to get there, and baby steps, you know? So it's just the coolest thing is people go, oh, well, if you can't have a cookie, you're not living. Well, I don't see it that way, but it's taken me years to get there.
Right.
So again, it's about, you know, do it consistently and learn how to balance it. And no restriction, like you said, that's not good either.
That's an unhealthy plan, restriction.
But if I was just eating junk and it was taking me away from eating the whole foods and that's all I was eating, then I know that that's a problem.
Right. Again, back to that quote or way to frame addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I think too, it comes back to listening to your body. And again, I know we said that we can have limitations in doing that, but it's a practice to be present. And so being present in the moment, in conversation, being present in your body after you eat something.
Yes.
That is a practice that I urge everybody to participate in, because that's when you learn that things don't feel good in your body. Like that's how you learn, is by eating something and feeling how it feels.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I feel really bloated. I feel gross. I overate there. Okay. And I'm not saying judge yourself. I'm just saying notice. Notice how that feels. And when we start to notice how things feel and we build awareness over things that don't feel good for us, that's where the change comes from. It needs to come from your experience in your body, in your life, because that's the only thing that's going to fuel you to change anything.
Absolutely. And how do we get into our body? Not when our nervous system's amped up.
Right.
So again, we come back to, we've got to regulate the nervous system first, or else we're not even going to be able to feel anything in our body. And that's where manual therapy, the movement therapy that we do, along with tools and strategies that are a little bit more somatic therapy based that I give people, or rhythmical breathing, that kind of thing. But people need to understand that the movement therapy and things like manual therapy, that's physiotherapy included, is registered massage therapy, chiropractic. It all helps to send signals back to the brain to help the nervous system calm. So it's not just about making those tissues healthier, but it's all the little nervous system receptors in those tissues and the way in which it's done that helps that nervous system discharge, and then you can be more present and engaged. The other thing is, when somebody's touching your body, you have no choice but to be present and engaged.
Right.
And so it also forces you to go into your body. And as soon as you're aware of your body and the space around you, the immediate space around you, the nervous system will calm. And we learned this through somatic therapy.
Yes.
And just to qualify, because we never did at the beginning, but my background with pain education in particular, pain neurophysiology, is not only my years of schooling, which is 7 years total, but also the 20 years experience plus work with Neil Pearson. So there's kind of, so people understand, I'm not just talking just, out of my, what. So.
No, you definitely have the education to support it.
Yeah, and we'll add some research in there.
Yeah, we can put Neil's website too. Yeah, and it's those small things that people can do. Like you just talked about orientating to the room, orientating to your body. So one of the practices that is really good for all of us is to, when you enter a room or when you notice that you're having a hard time being present, to orientate. What color are the walls? What color is the floor? What am I sitting in? Can I feel my body in this chair? What does it smell like in this room? Who am I sharing this space with? Those are all natural, normal things that we do without thinking about it. But sometimes when we're amped, our nervous system filters out that stuff and goes right to being stressed. So if we can orientate, our nervous system will come down. And getting outside, this is huge. As soon as you get outside, your nervous system regulates. Fresh air, like this is why the environment is such an important thing for us to continue to support and protect, is because like the connection that our bodies have with the nature, it's remarkable. Like you get into nature, and I'm not talking necessarily like, sometimes it can help to be in the city, but some of us require like actually getting out of the chaos of the city and getting out into the bush or down by the water. And you'll notice it'll be like,
yeah, absolutely.
Boom. And then you're in your body and it's this feeling. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of physiological things that go on why that works. And then they do, again, we're going to have to find so much research.
We'll do our best, but if we don't get it all, then this is just a call for you to
research it yourself. Yeah, because there is the new research that when you're out in nature, that the plant life actually gives off chemicals that affect the chemicals in our brain, and that's how it affects mood in a positive way. They've actually found that out. That's not just the carbon dioxide or the oxygen that the plants produce to help us breathe better, obviously, but there's other chemicals that they're actually releasing to help the mood of our brain. I know. Isn't that insane? I was like,
so wait, it really is symbiotic? Like we might actually need nature to survive.
Oh,
we can't just live in concrete jungles and like,
all the trees. Weird.
Weird.
Yeah.
Strange.
I know.
Yeah. It's just, it forces, when we look at the body in this holistic way, then we start to see how everything is interplaying and how we're connected. Because the nervous system is also the way in which our bodies communicate with one another in an unspoken manner. Like our nervous systems are feeding off of each other right now, and co-regulating is what it's called. Yeah. So you co-regulate all the time, which is why it can feel good to be around certain types of people, and certain people make you feel overamped or squirrely or unsettled. And there's also a reason why you're drawn to certain types of people, because your nervous systems co-regulate well.
Yes. We actually have a frequency that surrounds our body. There's an electromagnetic frequency. This is not rocket science. It's out there. It's not a woo-woo thing. And
it is
all
rocket
have
science.
A different,
it's not a woo-woo thing.
Actually, NASA did discover the electromagnetic field around the Earth and around our bodies. And if we're regulated with the Earth's electromagnetic field frequency, we have less incidence of disease. So, and it's the same with people. So when you come into contact with people and their frequency, their electromagnetic field is different than yours, then you feel it right away.
Yeah, you do.
You can walk into a room and feel it. You don't even have to be next to a person.
So this is bringing up, I've talked about my birthing experience quite a bit in the podcast, but I noticed this. I know co-regulation and I understand it like cognitively, but when I was in labor, you're so sensitive when you're in labor, right? Like a laboring woman or animal or just mammal is highly sensitive to their environment. And when you have a home birth, you have 2 midwives. So the second midwife comes when you're close to actually delivering. And I was in the water pool and was quite far along in my laboring experience, and the new midwife entered the room. And it was so unbelievable to me how hard that was. That was so difficult for me in that moment to accept the new person in the room. I got instantly frustrated, agitated. And she was starting to do the checks on the babies on Joni's heart rate. And so they have like I forget what it's called, but they
ultrasound thing.
Yeah. And so she was trying to come in to test, and I was physically making it impossible for her. Like, I can remember
now
this
she
and
knows.
laugh. Yeah, now she knows it's out there. But she was perfect, and I kept saying, can we not monitor the baby right now? Because I actually needed space in that moment to accept her into my birthing space. And she's an amazing midwife. It had nothing to do with her.
No.
But the fact that my space changed and my nervous system and my body needed time to regulate so I could continue laboring. And because I had such start-stop labor for a long time.
Right.
Or prodromal labor, they call it. I would find I would be getting these early contractions, but then my midwife would come to the house to check me, and my labor would stop. Or someone else would enter the room, and my labor would stop.
Yeah.
And then I realized I'm not going to actually get into labor until everybody leaves, and it's Tim and I.
Yeah.
And I let myself go there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I made that connection that I needed to labor with just him.
Yeah. And see, that goes back to, again, really stressing that the nervous system is about protection. And so your nervous system, somebody else came in the room, and because you're so hyper aware when you're a birthing mother, because there's a danger, you know, if you look at how our nervous system's evolved, if you were even a birthing animal, they go somewhere to hide because those babies are in danger, you know, and it's very similar sort of thing with humans. That's where it comes from, is, you know, this long primordial wiring that we have. And so your nervous system noticed something different in the environment. And of course, it's going to get into protection mode. It's going to be like, whoa, this might not be safe, right?
Yes.
So that's such a cool story because it really depicts that whole function of the nervous system to protect you. Mm-hmm. And the more hypervigilant you are, the more intense that protection mode is.
Yes. Yes. And the more that you've had to, the more you felt unsafe in your life and not been able to get safety, whatever that looks like, whether it's emotional or physical, you will have a very great protector nervous system. Yeah. And your nervous system does not want you to experience the pain that you've experienced in the past, especially if it was extreme and overwhelming, whether that be physical or emotional. Yeah. So it's going to do everything it can to stop you from going there.
Yeah, for sure.
So putting on those alarm bells, getting you ready to run away from it or fight it, or
So getting people to understand it's normal, and we just need to change it. And I shouldn't make it sound like it's just that easy, because it's not. But just to let people accept and acknowledge that, you know, they shouldn't feel badly about it. They shouldn't judge themselves for it. It's the way their nervous system is for whatever reason, but just being proactive about it. Even if it's tiny, and love yourself. Like, that's really all about, you know, caring for yourself and making sure that you find the right tools and maybe the strategies and the people around you to support you. But in the end, it really is your journey, and it's up to you how you let that journey unfold, right? That you're the one that holds the map. In the end, it's your map. It's nobody else's. We can all facilitate and we can help you and support you, but we're not really healers. You're the healer.
Yes.
And you have to take responsibility for it. Otherwise, you just won't get anywhere. And you will feel so much better when you take that accountability and be proactive, right? But getting there is so hard for some people. Yeah. And my heart goes out to them. And so knowing that and just getting that message out to people that we get it. As, you know, good healthcare professionals that understand the nervous system well, we understand where you are. We understand it's hard. We don't expect you to change overnight. All we want is for you to take little steps every day to help yourself. That's it.
So this is bringing up this responsibility piece that that can be, and so it's difficult for you as a practitioner when when you want to support people and people aren't ready to take that
Yes.
responsibility. And that's kind of what I hear coming through where you're like,
Yes.
just take the responsibility.
It's not easy either to get people
yes.
to that place.
And to be clear, Melissa and I both have experienced stress and struggle and trauma and things that have dysregulated us. So we're not coming from, and I'm just speaking for you
Yes,
too, that you're not coming from a
absolutely.
place of like not doing the work or not being in it, because I know you, that you don't expect your patients to do anything that you don't do personally or
Absolutely.
that you haven't tried personally. And I take that very seriously as a counselor. I feel like such a fraud if I ask my clients to step into a place that I'm not willing to go myself. And so, I'm going there as often as possible, trying to understand where they're coming from. And I know you are too. But responsibility is key. It's what gets people into the office for help. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning, moving your body. It's what gets you anywhere with self-healing. Is first you have to realize that you're the only one responsible to make those changes.
It's your choices.
Yeah.
They say life is a series of choices. It's true. And you either choose to do it or you don't. And if you're not going to choose to do it, that's fine too. But then you just got to be okay with where you are.
Right. And
Right?
I also would urge people, if you're feeling a lot of powerlessness, right? Because I think that's what it comes down to is this feeling of feeling powerless. Like, your pain is so immense that there's nothing you can do to change it. Or your past is so traumatic that life has just been so unfair to you and there's nothing that you can do to heal yourself because you're just so screwed up. Or you've tried everything and it's not working. If you're there, go get some support. If that's where you're at, I would say that is a good indicator that you need a little bit of extra help right now. And you need someone to hold that light for you, to tell you that you're not powerless. And, maybe that's not your manual therapist, or maybe that's not your chiropractor, but maybe it's a counselor.
Absolutely.
Maybe, and this is why some people end up using medication.
Yeah.
And I used to be so against medication when I started my counseling schooling. But as the years have gone on, I've realized that some people are in such a state of powerlessness that they need to take antidepressants for a period of time just so that they can get through their daily acts of living. If you're on it for a couple of years, I mean, my personal opinion is you need to look at that.
Yeah.
But, that powerlessness feels horrible. And if you can't get out of that rut yourself, you probably need some mental health support. But feeling like a victim is the worst feeling in the world. And if you're in a victim place and that's like you're feeling like the world is out to get you and you can't shift that, it's time to get some help.
And if you can't afford help, go to your physician first. If they don't give you what you need, look up programs like the Canadian Mental Health Association.
Yes.
There's lots of things out there that are free.
YouTube even, like there's a
Exactly.
lot of different
Yeah,
things that you can
self-help.
access, self-help. I mean, also, I'm just putting this out there, like some people do karma work too, like, or have programs like practitioners will have a few people that they offer lower rates to just to help.
Yeah.
I know I do that.
Yeah. Sliding scales.
Sliding scales. Like, just reach out. And if you can't reach out to a professional, reach out to a friend.
Yeah.
Somebody in your life that can support you in moving forward. Because that feeling of powerlessness, if you can't shift it and you don't want to take responsibility or you're really struggling with that, I would say that's an indicator of some deeper work.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And that's, when people come into my clinic, they're at least contemplating change at that point.
Yes.
That's why they're there. So we have a better chance of getting them down that road to be proactive and do the self-care. But it still takes some encouragement because there is a resistance when you're in that place. It's natural to feel like a victim. It's a natural way the brain kind of goes. It feels more comfortable that way because change is hard and change is scary.
Yes.
And so if you're already, your nerve system is feeling scared, like you want to change things, because like we said, it goes, what? This is new. We don't like this. So it's so normal to go down there and not judge yourself for it. Just know that's the place I'm in and I can do something. There must be some little thing that I can do.
Yeah.
And you're right. Both of us have gone through a lot, especially in the last 5 years, but over my lifetime, it's been a process. And I know that the only way my life has changed and been fulfilling is by taking action every day. Some little step, if I'm not feeling good or I want something to change, I know it's only me that can do it. There's nobody else that can do it for me. There might be people that can help and support, but in the end, it's me. And once I really believed that, like really truly felt that emotionally, because a lot of times you know that, but to actually feel it and live it is a totally different thing.
Yeah.
Life just takes off, and it's not all smooth, but it's way more fulfilling, like way more.
Yeah. Taking action is first step to anything.
It's life.
Purpose.
Yeah.
Purpose.
Yeah. So
we're
we could get
animals.
home
We're
and-
mammals. We need to work. We need to do things. Like if you're not, and it's an exponential thing. Like you do one small thing every day, and all of a sudden that like activity of 10 minutes. I talk about this with folks who are struggling with depression or low motivation. It's like set a timer, do something for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. If you can't get in the shower for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
right? And then you can decide at the end of that 10 minutes whether you're going to continue or not. Most of the time you'll probably continue. But if you're not, that's okay. But you start doing that. And after a week of doing that, it starts to feel good because you're doing that one thing for 10 minutes. Then you're going to add something else on. And then it becomes this growth of like, you start to feel more confident doing these things, whether it's making sure you start by drinking your water. You know, you're not worrying about getting exercise yet. You're worrying about drinking enough water. Well, you do that for a week, you start to feel the benefits. Oh, I'm going to do more. I'm going to do more. But action.
Yeah.
Action.
So I'm just started reading a book because I would like to improve my skills on how to help people be more accountable with themselves and their health. Because it's a little bit of a hard sell when we're in that place. And it's called QBQ, and I believe it's John Miller, but it's the question behind the question. And it's a very light read. It's a small book. You can also get it on an audiobook if you'd rather. But it's an amazing book to even teach practitioners how to help people become accountable. But if people are ready to really learn how to take more responsibility for their lives, it's something I would highly recommend people to read.
The question behind the question.
Yeah, question behind the question.
Okay, we'll link that one.
Really, really good.
Yeah. You want to tell us a little bit about it? What's the part that's sticking with you right now with that?
You know what? I think because I haven't read it all the way completely through, but the first thing that stuck with me was when he talks about stress. And people tend to think of stress as coming from outside of themselves and things cause them stress. But really, in the end, stress is a choice. And I know this is hard for me. And he even says in the book, this is really hard sell, and it's really hard to get people to be okay with this. But the fact that any event that happens, you decide how you're going to respond to it, and that creates the outcome. And that is a formula called E+R=O. And that comes from Jack Canfield, who is another famous author for Chicken Soup for the Soul. And he does motivational and self-help and success seminars.
Which you did.
Which I've been to,
Yeah.
his week-long one. And I've done some one-on-one training with him as well. And E+R=O, I think, is the basis to making our society better, because if we all look at an event that happens, and it could be a really horrible event, it really depends on our response, what the outcome is. And that really goes back to stress, because if you have a stressful situation, you can decide how you respond to that, and that will determine what the outcome is of that situation, but also how it affects your body and your brain and your nervous system.
And you know what else is coming up for me right now?
Yes.
It's kind of karma, like the idea of what karma is.
Yes.
Because karma is like the ripple effect of your actions.
That's right.
So the way that you respond to something determines so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this book, he talked about how this one lady came up to him at a seminar, this QBQ book, and said, there's no way, everything else causes stress. There's no way that I cause my own stress in my life. It can't possibly be me, and I'm going to research it, and I'm going to get back to you. And he said, that's great. I want you to do that. I want to hear this. So a couple months later, he got an email, and she said, you know what? I've researched it inside and out. And you're right, it's all the way I'm responding to things, and I'm going to now take control of my life, and I'm going to decide how I respond to things and control my stress. So it's really a great read, and it's in short. Like, he didn't spend a whole chapter talking about that. I think it was like 2 or 3 pages. So it's easy to read.
It stuck with you.
Yeah.
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 This brings me to mindfulness or meditation, and how meditation just sitting for 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day helps us learn how to respond versus react. And it helps our nervous system come down, even if our nervous system is screaming for those 5 minutes, which mostly everybody says happens. Like, I can't sit still and I can't stop thinking when I do meditation, which, newsflash, you're actually not supposed to stop thinking when you do meditation. Or, it's not easy. It's actually, that is the work, is sitting with the mind that you have for those 10 minutes and trying to breathe through it. But anyways, when we react, when our reactivity to situations, and I was going to say this is also has to do with the nervous system, but let's just leave that because we've talked about that a lot. Your reactivity to a situation is what causes the outcome, right? And so many of us, including myself, are reactive. So something happens and you have a reaction instantly, whether that's emotionally or even physically. And we need to find a way to intercept that. Like, how can you draw that space, that time and space out? When something happens to you, and my friend Bonnie has this saying that she learned from a Pema Chodron workshop. It's act like a log. Act like a log. When something happens, how can you be like a log and not react?
Do nothing.
Do nothing for a moment. Just wait. Sit in that reaction. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
What do you want to say?
And respond instead of react.
That's right. Wait till the reaction settles. Some of us need to actually take physical space in a nice way and ask, I need space. And figure it out. Let the reaction fade and then respond. But so many of us, and I struggle with this a lot. I'm very reactive. React, get mad, or get excited, or whatever it is. Like, reactions aren't always bad. Like, in a conversation, I react by interrupting. Like, oh, that's great.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that we're not always going to be perfect at that, and we'll never actually be perfect at that.
No.
And there's going to be times where you react anyways. Say the other day, I almost got into a fender bender on the ice sheet that was on the road, and your heart rate increases and you sweat and I had anxiety when I got home, and I noticing it, acknowledging it, being okay with it, and then doing something about it to change that physical feeling in your body, right?
So what did you do? Or
that emotional feeling. So I ate something that was healthy for me, drank some water, because I think I hadn't had any water that day either, and was a little dehydrated. Even though I wasn't thirsty, I wasn't hungry, just had something slightly nutritious, so I had something in my body, and then I laid down and tried to have a nap. Did a little bit of rhythmical breathing, which we can talk about, the box breathing, which is a 4-count inhale, a 4-count hold, 4-count exhale, and a 4-count hold, and then repeat the cycle.
Yeah.
And sort of fell in and out of sleep. And when I woke up, I did feel better. Then I also take supplements that help my nervous system, something called phosphatidylserine, or PS for short, and magnesium glycinate.
Yes, I love that
and those minerals and supplements help my cortisol levels, which cortisol is your stress hormone. And once the cortisol comes back down to normal, it will help the body and the nervous system regulate again. So I have a routine when I notice this, and I don't beat myself up about it. And it's funny because, as I say, I don't beat myself up. I did have a moment where I went, oh, Melissa, like, what is wrong with you? You're so amped up. Because I'm not normally amped up. I'm a pretty calm person. And so I get a little bit angry with myself, or a little bit annoyed. And then I go, okay, what would you tell your patients to do? And just do it. And it works. And then you get through it, and it doesn't become this big trauma that you're carrying with you, and you end up in your car the next time and you're freaked out because your nervous system is still amped.
So when you say discharge, we've said discharge the nervous system a lot throughout the podcast. And I'm glad that I remembered this. When you say discharge, we're talking about, like, give the nervous system time to settle back down, right? So that energy can either release, or, your body has time. That's what we mean when we say discharge.
Yeah. So if you think of the nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, you want it to kind of be even. Right? So that if the sympathetic is way up here and the parasympathetic's down here, you can't be present and engaged. You can only be present and engaged really in the parasympathetic mode. So when we discharge, we're talking about bringing that down so they're more even.
Okay, yes.
Right?
Yes, and that's how I think about it too. Or like a spike, like because they're not on at the same time, are they? Like, you either, this is a question I have.
Yeah, I think For the most part, they are. It's just one's more dominant.
I see. Okay, it's a dominant
It's
thing.
a dominant thing.
Okay.
And then the parasympathetic never increases. That's something interesting to note. It stays about the same. It's the sympathetic that goes up and down.
Right, that has like it amps up or
Yeah.
lowers. Okay. So you talked about acceptance. Acceptance is huge for personal growth or for coping. Because when we push away reality or avoid pain or avoid emotional feelings, it gets bigger for most of us. Or our stress gets bigger because we're having judgments or feelings about that experience, which becomes more stressful. Right? So you talked about you having a reaction. Melissa, why are you feeling this way? And that reaction in itself would just add more stress to your system. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so it's not helpful.
No.
And so this is why acceptance, and I talked about this in the last podcast with Corey, acceptance is such an important practice because when we can just accept where we're at physically, it brings our nervous system down. But when we have judgments or anger towards ourselves or frustrations, it just adds more to the plate.
Yeah, and to the nervous system amping because those are negative thoughts.
Right.
And the negative thoughts create the nervous system recognizing or the brain recognizing that there might be danger.
Right.
Negative thoughts create a danger signal to the brain. And so the positive thoughts saying, okay, this is okay, I can deal with this, that makes that nervous system go, oh, okay, we're good.
And it's less of a hurdle.
Yeah.
It's less of a thing to overcome.
So that's why when I'm working with people, and as you know, there's times when we have to stress tissues to make them change.
You mean make people cry on the table?
Yes, sometimes we get a little bit watery eyes, but and it's not that I need to inflict pain or discomfort, but if you want change in the tissue and you want it quite quickly, there are techniques I can use that people don't really feel at all, like kind of voodoo techniques, but they take a lot longer. And a lot of times people need results now. They need to feel like something's changing. So as long as they're okay with it, I coach them through breathing and relaxing through discomfort as we're working on them. And it's really important. That's why it's so important to get them to interpret the discomfort that I am inflicting or that they are inflicting by doing a movement or an exercise as okay.
Right.
Because if they don't, and they're on the table and they go, oh my God, that hurts, they're sending that signal to the brain that it's danger. If they're on the table and they breathe through it rhythmically and they tell their brain it's okay, and they actually focus on the pain intently and figure out where the pain is, I often get them to, in their mind's eye, draw the outline of the pain with a Sharpie pen, if they had a Sharpie pen, so that the brain is going, well, if I'm focusing on it and I'm breathing through it, it can't be that bad. It mustn't be danger. It's when you're trying to go to your happy place and ignore it and run away from it, the brain thinks, oh, well, this has got to be danger because or else, we're running away from it.
Right. Hey, that's such a good point, Melissa. And that's the same with emotional pain. Like it
Exactly.
must be, yeah. So avoidance is not the key.
No, it's not. It just makes it worse.
It gets worse. Yes.
Yeah. So it is. It's exactly the same. And it comes back to what we talked about at the beginning, where the emotional, traumatic, psychological is exactly the same as the physical manifestation. Pain and emotional trauma, it's just emotional pain or physical pain. It all is interpreted by the brain the same way.
It's pain.
It's pain.
It's pain.
Pain is pain is pain.
And I was thinking when you're talking about like inflicting discomfort on the table to activate the tissues, it's like the same when you have anxiety, right? So people, I've also in the past struggled a lot with anxiety. So when you have anxiety, you want to avoid the things that you're finding anxious. And so the more you do that, the more those things cause anxiety. And so the way to move through anxiety is to do the thing you don't want to do. Small baby steps and breathe through it. Again, I hate being the bearer of that news, but I've lived it.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, like I'll give the silly example of getting into cold water. Like I hate cold water. I hate water. And I haven't always been that way, but I developed that probably teens and older. And I didn't ever want to go there, and it would just cause me discomfort.
Yep.
And then I made this agreement that every time I would have the opportunity to get into a lake or a natural body of water, even if it's cold, I'm going to get in. Maybe not all the way over the head, but I'm going to get in. And I'm going to breathe through it, and I'm going to do it. Even though I don't want to do it, I'm going to do it. And I did. And now I go in water and it's not a big deal.
Yeah. You have to train your nervous system. You have to train it to understand what is dangerous and what is not. And when you're really amped up all the time, it's almost impossible to train it. So you got to start bringing it down, and then you can start telling it what's safe and what's not safe. It's retraining your brain.
It is.
Retraining
And it's
the brain.
very exciting that we can do it.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting to know like that we have all these ways to biohack our bodies and also like psychologically support ourselves, and that this system, this body has its own intricate way of operating, and you developing that understanding of yourself is so important, and developing the ways to support it. And there's so many ways about it too. And if you're struggling with things like trauma or chronic pain, you know, there's different types of therapies and things that you can try out. Like I tried out so many things before I realized what actually worked for me. And, you know, like I offer EMDR therapy, which is a great type of therapy to help with trauma and regulating the nervous system. But I've done somatic experiencing as a therapy as a client. And some people don't even want to go to counseling. They'd rather do this stuff on their own.
Yeah.
Right? And that's great.
That's fine. It's whatever works for you.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's why when things aren't working for patients when I'm treating them, it's great. I have other practitioners that maybe I can send them to or refer them to in the clinic, but I also send them outside the clinic if I have to.
Yeah.
You know, it's just whatever's going to work for that person. And that's the important part is getting them and getting that rapport with them so you understand what they need. And if it's not working, let's find something else. It's just as simple as that.
So Mel, can I ask you a couple personal questions?
Sure.
Yeah. We've been talking lots about our jobs. It's getting cold in here.
Science.
Yeah.
It's getting cold in here.
Because I closed all the vents.
It's okay. It's good. It keeps us active and alert.
There you go. We've talked a lot about both of our roles as practitioners, but you're also a human who walks around this earth, you know, living and learning. What would you say has been one of the hardest things that you've overcome, or maybe it's an ongoing thing that continues to show up in your life, but that you feel comfortable sharing with others that you're always engaging with?
I think, and you and I have discussed this a lot, is probably getting over just my own demons and my own, I guess, trauma, dysfunction from the way I grew up. Love my mom and dad. They're great. There's no handbook with parenting, but every family has dysfunction.
Yes.
And every human, depending on, you know, not only their environment, but their genetics and is that nature nurture sort of theory, will learn to cope with their environment a certain way. And that molds us as we get older. And I think the biggest thing I've had to overcome is my own demons, my confidence, my self-esteem, self-doubt, which comes from confidence and self-esteem. And the big piece for that was getting my core values in place, which really came into play very intensely once I went to the Jack Canfield seminar, which was in 2013. And I was already working on it, but not understanding what it was. So what he did really validated where I was at. And I was very much along the same mindset, but he gives so many great tools and he has so much good information. And the responsibility piece, it's the number one success principle for success in life on any level. And it really is the only piece that makes you move forward, the biggest piece that makes you move forward. And then you can go to the other steps. So I think finding out what my core values were, which was accountability, integrity, which I think comes from accountability, and honesty, and being honest with myself as well as others. And again, that can't happen unless you have the responsibility or accountability piece. Right. They all kind of tie in. And once I started living those, like really living them, excuse me, my world started to change. But it's a constant thing because I also have some really serious abandonment issues. Don't ask me totally where they came from. You know, it's not like I got left on a porch somewhere, because it's not always a physical abandonment that happens. It can be an emotional abandonment. I've read lots of books on it, and you know as well as I do that it can come from a multitude of different dysfunctional things in your environment, and it can be nothing related to actually being abandoned.
Right.
But that's how our brains interpret it.
So it's an attachment thing for you. It's a thing around attachment.
Attachment.
Yeah.
So I have some attachment issues. And so this has been a big, and it's an ongoing thing.
Right.
And it's about my boundaries. And if I don't keep my boundaries in place, which again comes from integrity, responsibility, and honesty, and all my core values, and my
Honesty,
self-esteem,
yes.
and being
Yes.
honest with myself about what I'm feeling and what I need to do to make sure that I address that attachment issue that I'm having at the moment, and the anxiety around it, or the fear that I'm having around it, and my nerve system's amping, and I'm getting anxiety because I'm having some issues with
Because you're looking for
attachment.
connection. So I know
Yeah.
you a bit. So a big thing for you is connecting with others.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that connection becomes the most important thing, and then the self gets put last because you're looking for connection.
Right.
And then you're backtracking and trying to navigate when your feelings haven't been heard, or when you and I experience a similar thing, and I know a lot of people do. So it's like you're putting that connection with another ahead of your own personal needs.
Yes.
And then, you're not being honest with yourself, and you don't feel, maybe some of us don't feel like our needs should matter or be met.
Self-worth,
So,
right?
Self-worth.
That we're not really worthy of it.
Right.
So then that comes to self-esteem and confidence and all that.
And actually
So-
communicating what's okay for you.
Yeah, and
what's
that
not.
comes back to my work. I mean, there's a reason why I chose this kind of work. There's a reason why I chose a profession that's a helping profession, because I have attachment issues. So really my issues kind of help me do wonderful things, right? That are fulfilling.
That's
So
right.
it's not a bad thing. So our dysfunctions mold us, but they can mold us in good ways as long as we keep them healthy and, again, keep them managed.
That's right.
It's managing them.
And understanding them. Like, they say the
Yeah.
wounded healer. Like, so many of us that are in this type of work are here because we value connection so much. And like attachment is like when I talk about attachment, I'm meaning like your connection with others. And some of us have different types of attachment wounds that have happened because life, our parents go through life, and maybe they couldn't give us the emotional attention that we needed, or maybe they were really dysregulated themselves, or were dealing with a lot of stressors. So a lot of us in this field really value connection, or, maybe we are looking for extra attachment or community or whatever.
Yeah.
But the most important thing that I'm taking from what you're saying is that our issues or our struggles or our trauma can actually become our best resource.
Absolutely.
And for many of us, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is good to go back to what we've been talking about the whole time is don't beat yourself up about where you are. And if you feel like you're a victim and the world is against you, this can be a good thing in the end, because you're going through a massive struggle right now. And when you overcome that, or when you start to manage it better and life gets better, you will have learned from that. But if you stay in that place of being a victim, you will never learn from it. And so you will never gain anything from it. So if you want to gain something and have a fulfilling life, take the action to manage that and come out of that victim place and become an empowered person.
That's beautiful. It's true. And it sounds like it's also part of your journey and what you've experienced. You're not coming from someone who hasn't had struggle.
No.
But here's the thing, Mel, and I know you, so that's why I specifically am speaking to this right now, because a client might look at you and presume that you've had an extremely privileged, easy life. And I'm like, in some respects you have, right? Because it's
Absolutely.
all relative. But I mean,
Yes.
someone might look at you and think like, you're a very healthy woman. You are educated, you're well-spoken, you're successful, you're ambitious. So someone might assume you've had it made.
Right.
You've had it handed to you.
Right.
But I know you, so I know that's not the case. And so all the stuff that you're sharing and talking about today, you come from it honestly, and you've experienced struggle and disconnection and challenge. And so it's important to remind ourselves that most people have.
And just because, anybody can look at other people they know, there's a lot of people in this world that are handed things, and they come from wealthy families, and they seem to have every opportunity, but they're not able to take it.
Right.
Because they have other dysfunctions going on in their life, or other traumas. Their environment maybe hasn't been so functional, or they've had physical. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you've had seemingly great opportunities. It's what you do with them.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I did. I worked for it, and I'm proud of it, but I'm still working.
Yeah. And that's
And I'll
the thing,
never
it
stop.
doesn't end.
Doesn't end. It never ends.
No, and this is why I'm
Life
always
would be
so
boring.
attracted to things like Buddhism, right? Because one of the core principles of Buddhism is like suffering will happen.
Yes.
And nothing's permanent.
And I have to tell you that I almost feel like we maybe have to have a session about this suffering thing, because I almost feel like, and I know that I've gotten to a place where I've recognized that at one point in my life, I think when I was younger, I kind of liked the drama because it distracts you from your issues. Then you never have to deal with your crap because you're always dealing with everybody else's crap or creating it. But I kind of like struggle. Even though immediately when something happens, say at my clinic or in my personal life, you go, oh man. But then there's part of me that kind of goes, ooh, what can I learn from this? How am I going to get better after this, right? What tools can I put in, and can I get through this? And when I get through it, it's so empowering. It's like a rush. It's like my new dopamine rush. It's like my addiction almost, but I don't create it. So that's why it's not really an addiction, but it feeds me. Getting through my struggle and getting to the joy, or not even getting to the joy, just getting through the struggle and managing my life in a positive way is just, it feeds me. It's fabulous.
And it's there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I think that's healthy. That's what we're talking about, healthy ways to deal with struggle and dysfunction.
Right. Like look at it as, because I think as
an
humans,
opportunity.
Yes, as an opportunity to learn and grow. And I think as humans, like on a biological evolutionary level, we actually need challenge. We need it. We need it to feel good. We need to accomplish. We need to do. We need to take responsibility. We need to move forward in life, growth, right? Like that is necessary.
Yes.
So when we can use periods of struggle as opportunities to grow,
Yes.
and opportunities to learn, then it changes the perspective in the game, right? Because we might be okay with that on the basketball court, or we might be okay with that on a board game. Like, ooh, challenge this way. But then when it comes to life, we're like, grrr,
Yeah.
right? But if we could switch that and be like, ooh, interesting obstacle.
Yeah, right?
How can I take this on? And, you know, how can I move through this? And you know what?
Yeah.
You're also going to fail. This is the other thing.
Absolutely.
Acceptance of failure.
Good one.
Key.
Yes.
Because
key.
you will fail.
Yeah.
And
then
you'll upset people.
Yeah.
You'll upset yourself.
Totally. And then you'll go, okay, so what can I do differently next time?
Learning
From it. And talking about challenge, the brain does crave challenge. And that's what gives us some of our different rushes of chemicals in our brain that make us feel good and releases endorphins. But healthy challenges, again, figuring out what those healthy challenges are, and having purpose, right? So if we don't have purpose in life, that is how society and humans thrive, is they need purpose. It used to be our purpose was to survive when we didn't have the Industrial Revolution and, you know, if whatever theory you think of, but you know, when we were living hand to mouth and we were just making sure we had a roof over our head and food in our belly, and we don't need to do that anymore because we're really comfortable. Most of us, that's true. Some of us are still in survival mode. So surviving was our purpose. And for some people, unfortunately, it still is. But for the rest of us, we need to find other purposes and other passions, healthy ones.
Yes.
So that feeds our brain in a healthy way. And that's what motivates us to keep moving forward and learning and growing. Otherwise, we just peter out and start existing, and life is not good.
It's dull.
It's dull.
And that's when you feel things like hopelessness and depression.
That's right. Exactly.
And like you don't matter.
Yeah.
You know, purpose is huge.
It's unhealthy for the brain not to have a healthy purpose in life.
You need to do things. And again, we're coming back to responsibility and action and challenge and growth and, you know,
Yeah.
But also learning, it's not just that, because it's also learning how to be here.
Yeah.
Right now.
Be present.
With
present.
With the person you're having a conversation with the coffee you're drinking or the tea you're drinking. Mel, you're such an inspiring human.
No, you are too. This is so great. Thank you for having me. It's been awesome. I always love sharing this.
Yeah, and I think round 2 was pretty good. What do you think?
I think round 2 is awesome.
So we will do our best to link as much research as possible.
Yeah.
But if there's anything today that really sparked your interest and you're like, they said that thing, I encourage you to dive deeper. Go look it up. If you have any questions or about Mel's services, where can people find you?
ChangeYourPainKamloops.com. And you'll also find our booking site on there, and you can give us a call anytime. You can probably reach us by email as well. I would say calling is probably the best first step. You'll get somebody right away. Emails sometimes take some time. And, yeah.
And you're on the social medias. I think we're on Instagram.
Yes, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram.
So what's your Instagram handle? Do you remember?
I think it's just Change Your Pain.
I think so.
And then
At
it's
Change
under
Your
my
Pain.
name too. So
Okay.
I have both of them. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
well,
yeah.
I will also link those. And such a freaking pleasure. I love you, and you have so much to offer this world, and thank you for being here.
Likewise, I feel the very same way about you. I'm so glad that we met.
Okay, insert crush session.
Yeah, I know. Oh, so cheese.
So much cheese. Melissa and I love each
It's
other in
okay.
case
Yeah.
nobody got that memo,
Yeah, right?
and we really enjoy our friendship. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.